Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.
Talking About Marketing is a podcast for business owners and leaders, produced by my dad, Steve Davis, and his colleague at Talked About Marketing, David Olney, in which they explore marketing through the lens of their own 4 Ps: person, principles, problems, and perspicacity. Yes, you heard that correctly. Apart from their love of words, they really love helping people. So they hope this podcast will become a trusted companion on your journey in business.
David Olney, before we start, I want to ask you a question on behalf of our listeners.
Should I be afraid?
No, just answer the question.
Okay.
They're about to invest, 30 minutes of listening time. What's in it for them?
What's in it for them? Less laughs than John Cleese can provide, but more useful information for being more confident and happy at work than most other people can provide.
Wow. On that note, let's get underway. Do you like having random curveballs thrown at you?
Absolutely. It's part of being blind. They're usually random trees where me and the cane have walked under them happily and then smack straight in my hat, which is why I always wear a hat.
Our 4 Ps. Number 1, person. The aim of life is self-development. To realise one's nature perfectly. That is what each of us is here for. Oscar Wilde.
I never thought the day would come, David, when I'd be in a marketing podcast and have a chance to legitimately reference one of my comic heroes, John Cleese.
Are you going to spin round and round on your chair in excitement?
Now, I'm going to walk a funny walk as
I knew he was going to do that.
Well, no, I want to know if this is a live podcast or is it dead? Anyway, there's so many references which we are not going to go into with John Cleese and his wonderful history, particularly of being involved in Monty Python. But I really think Fawlty Towers was perhaps at the height of his comic genius, whereas some of the Python stuff with Life of Brian in particular, Holy Grail, was the height of melding well-reasoned observations of historical and philosophical weight with comedy. I think it's just a beautiful way that man's brain works.
I'm a holy grail person because I like the rabbit, whatever the rabbit's called.
I'm not even sure if the rabbit has a name, does it? But it guards the holy hand grenade.
So they have to use the holy hand grenade on the rabbit, and that's cool.
Now, the reason I'm bringing up John Cleese in this first segment, which is our person segment, something for all of us, is he has a bit of a program at the moment of his battle against wokeism, as he calls it, where he thinks that there's a heavy weight that's pulling down on the sides of our thought in society, in which we're trying to overthink ourselves and double guess ourselves too much with external voices too, looking for where we could be going wrong, as opposed to flying the kite and maybe chancing on something new. And he was a guest speaker at an event called Freedom Fest, which is an annual gathering of libertarians in Las Vegas, and he was there to discuss creativity. And he's 82 years old, or he was at the time of recording that, and still sharp as a tack, and has plenty of things to share. And when I heard him with this reference about how our brains sort of habituate away from creativity, I thought, I've got to share this on Talking About Marketing. Let's have a listen to this little snippet from his interview on stage at that event with Nick Gillespie from Reason.
creativity is all about getting out of a rut. You see, if you're under any kind of pressure, you will always resort to stereotypical thinking. Do you see what I mean? You'll go back. There was a Canadian psychoneurologist called Donald Bem, I think, and he said neurons that fire together wire together. In other words, if you create in thinking a neural pathway, then and you do that a few more times, it becomes the pathway. Right. You see, it's like wiring it. And I think there's a very good parallel with this. Somebody once said it's a bit like hiring a little house in the summer for a holiday for a month. And you go into the house and you think, oh, this is great. You go to the back garden and the grass is this high, but there's a little shed over there. And you think, I wonder what's in the shed. So you make your way through and you get to the shed. Oh, I didn't know that would be there. And then when you come back, you don't come back by a different path, do you? Because this is already easier. Mm-hmm. So you come back the same path. And whenever you go to the shed, you go by that path. Well, what else is in the grass? You see, you never get to explore it. So the question, how do you get out of the rut? How do you get out of the wiring and get out of the rut and look around in the grass?
I love that imagery, David, of first of all, forging a path through the tall grass, but then after that, just sticking to that path and going back and forth. Because it's very symbolic that I think most of us at some point have had a time where we had to blaze a trail, but then, tiredness, busyness, fear, just make it easier to stick to the well-worn path. And so for me, hearing that is a little bit of a wake-up call, a rallying call to say, you know what, push yourself a different way. Try a different pathway to get something. And if I just allude to the fact that I was in a writers group for many years at La Mama Theatre here in Adelaide, we would often set ourselves writing challenges where we would say, right, you're going to write a poem of 11 lines length. You need to use the colour orange, and you've got to have 3 nouns in every line. Go. And what I found was when restrictions were placed upon us, our creativity raced to the skies, as opposed to sitting with a blank piece of paper and going, I've got to be creative now. And I think that is the pigeon pair with what Cleese is talking about by bringing up that analogy of following the path. Actually, sometimes forcing ourselves, even with arbitrary restrictions, triggers that part of us that can forge paths to have a good crack at it. And more often than not, we're going to be surprised.
You're right. Arbitrary restrictions are great because people still feel they've got structure, but they're doing something new. So it's a tool I've used lots of time when teaching people to solve complex problems, and that is to get them to think about, all right, when we finish today, go from here to home a completely different way than you would normally. So, you have to leave here the same way and you have to get home the same way because you live on the same street. But everything else, different bus, different train, different roads. If you walk a big chunk of it, walk on the other side of the street at an absolute minimum. And it's always been fascinating how many people report back, even with something as mundane as going home a different way, how elated they felt to be more situationally aware and notice more cool little things in the world than they would normally notice.
Yes, because it's part of our evolution, isn't it? That the brain is trying to conserve its energy as much as possible. So when you're doing something the same way, it loves it because it gets to sort of turn off and be smart, in inverted commas. It's when you upset it that it has to wake itself up and go, hang on. And that's where we get the gift of seeing things from a different angle or seeing things afresh, seeing totally different things. I'm doing a workshop, one of my workshops on using your smartphone better to take better photos and videos. And yesterday, at the time of recording, I was walking around Thorndon Park and I saw a snapped in half tree. And I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity. So I took some photos and I deliberately thought, okay, how am I trying to capture the power and force of the storm that had gone through here, but also the juxtaposition of this brokenness within nature. And as I moved around and took photos from different angles, different proximities, etc., there's so much difference, so much richness in that one tree. By changing the angle I was photographing it from, it really dovetails into what we're talking about here. It's just looking at things from a different angle, and even your thing with your students, even walking the same street, but on the other side, different experience.
Yeah. And again, it's just about breaking the habituation of repetition. So the bit of the brain you're talking about is the basal ganglia, and the basal ganglia's mission in life is to save calories by repeating yesterday. That makes the basal ganglia happy. And it's the main reason people can go through a week of their life and go, nothing happened. Well, nothing happened because you let your basal ganglia continue to run the video of yesterday until the whole week became a rerun of a single day. Get up, do stuff, go to work, come home, sit in front of a TV, fall down. Basal ganglia was deliriously happy, and we suffer terribly when life is reduced to that level. For any of you that enjoyed the clip, it's definitely well worth getting Cleese's book called Creativity. The audiobook is fantastic where he reads it himself, because one of the big ideas that comes across beautifully in the book is the significance of remembering how to be playful, and that you don't have to regain the ability to be playful at work necessarily to improve work. As long as you regain the ability to be playful somewhere, it's going to freshen your brain back up. So even if you can only find 5 minutes to just take joy in doing something simple where you just get lost in the immersion, whether it's doodling, drawing, picking up a musical instrument, trying to juggle a couple of tennis balls, just try and get back the ability to just be in the moment, having fun, having a go, because it will spread through your entire day.
I wished I disagreed with you, David, but I don't believe this is the right room for an argument.
Is this the right room for an argument?
I've told you once.
No, you haven't.
Yes, I have.
When?
Just now.
No, you didn't.
Yes, I did.
Didn't. I didn't.
I'm telling you I did.
You did not.
Oh, I'm sorry, is this a 5-minute argument or the full half hour?
Oh, just the 5-minute one.
Fine. Thank you. Anyway, I did.
You most certainly did not.
Now, let's get one thing quite clear. I most definitely told you.
You did not.
Yes, I did.
You did not.
Yes, I did.
Didn't.
Yes, I did.
Didn't.
Yes, I did.
That was a Monty Python reference.
Yes, that's why I stayed quiet.
Perfect. The other reason I wanted to share this is I do meet small business owners from time to time who just seem really worn out and like they're going through the motions, and they feel trapped in that space. And I hope if you are that person and you're feeling like you can identify with that at the moment, maybe the random thing, I'm thinking in particular of a gentleman who was running a motel in a country town. I won't mention any more specifics than that. But even he doing the same thing, the routines as people come in, even standing at a different part of the desk or using a different pen or changing the book differently, just something like that, even at a basic level, might inject a freshness in life that could lead to a smile and a chance to enjoy and relish each moment rather than just endure them. And I think that's the gift of what Cleese's rally call to creativity gives all of us in small business and in life is, hey, yep, there are going to be some mundane things we have to do all the time, but mix it up. How can we make it a bit different? And I think jewels will fall from that as opposed to just being locked underground and us walking past them day in, day out when we don't pay attention, when we give in to the brain's penchant for just making it easy.
Our 4 Ps. Number 2, principles. You can never be overdressed or overeducated. Oscar Wilde.
David Olney, one of the things I love about working with you here at Talked About Marketing is that every time it seems that I meet you or talk to you, there's another book that you're recommending. And one that you did so recently was by Joe Polish, a book called What's in It for Them. And that's given rise to us having a discussion about that today. So what's in it for us to have read this book and be discussing it?
That's exactly the right approach to take to Joe Polish's work. So for everyone who hasn't heard of Joe Polish before, he's a very successful marketer, has been successful for probably nearly 30 years now. Started off at 19, having got past a major drug addiction as a carpet cleaner. Within a year, realized he was better at marketing carpet cleaning than he was being a carpet cleaner, and became the main marketer in America for carpet cleaners. But very much with a plus-sum game model. Whatever we do has to be good for us in our little businesses and for the customers. Everyone's got to win. So he really started with a what's in it for them approach at the very beginning of his career. And it's been characteristic ever since. And in a lot of media, he gets described as the most connected person in the world. And not because he's an egomaniac who chases after stars to get photos or signatures, but because every time he talks to someone, his first thought is, okay, who could I put you in touch with where the two of you together could both achieve something you would both value and get more out of life by interacting than you would get separately? So his big thing is the importance of working together to get good outcomes for everyone.
And I must say, as I was reading it, David, upon your recollection, because it really, a lot of what Joe Polish talks about in this book and in a lot of his stuff, the messy essence of DNA of it is so closely related to our essence and DNA. It talked about marketing. I was expecting this to be a hardcore business book, but it was more almost like a diary reflection at a personal level from which you could take from it what you wanted. Did you get that sense as well?
Absolutely, but I think this is where it's so important. We get bombarded by business books written by professors at one of the big business schools in America like Wharton or Harvard, or we get bombarded by the next book by a Fortune 500 CEO, and everyone's shiny suits get shinier, and everyone's thing of you got to push hard gets stronger and stronger. Now we have a guy who's been successful basically for 30 years who brings it back down to a human level of how are you going to treat people. And I think the book is very surprising for a lot of people that it's not the hardcore business book that people have come to expect from someone with that much success. And that is exactly Joe Polish's point. If you don't get the human stuff right, you're not going to succeed in business, because it's no longer about how hardcore you can be and how shiny your suit is. It's about, are you always thinking about the people around you? Because if you aren't, someone else will, and they will leave and work with someone else and achieve more because they're in a caring environment where there's a better chance of everyone getting an outcome they're happy with.
Like the people that you really resonate with, go deep with that. So I always try to do that with anyone, and I don't expect anyone to give anything to me without creating value first. It goes back to the question, what's in it for them? The world doesn't owe me anything. The world doesn't owe any of you anything. You don't get heat out of the fireplace until you put in the wood. So people want things given to them, but they have to generate it. And that's what entrepreneurship is. You actually go out and create something, and you generate it by being useful, being grateful, being valuable, not being egotistical. There's connecting, which is genuine connecting, and there's connecting. People that have that sales pitch, they always got to do their sales pitch. There's nothing wrong with pursuing opportunities. I love opportunities, but there's a big difference between pursuing an opportunity and being an opportunist.
It's really sad that we need a book like this, because especially within the networking environment, there are so many people, and I've seen presentations on tricks, in inverted commas, you can use in networking. And he just sort of blows that aside, wipes it off the table with one hand and says, hey, before there's any sense of getting something out of a relationship, how can I make myself useful? How can I maintain a sense of being grateful about the opportunity for interaction? And how can I make myself valuable to the other person? And really, it doesn't have to be any more complicated than that, because if that's your demeanor with which you enter into a potential discussion and relationship, who wouldn't want to be with someone like you? And I think it was in this book where he said the formula for trust is the feeling of comfort with another person multiplied by time.
Yep.
So the more that you have just created this comfortable sense of relationship and time has elapsed, the more trust grows. And it's in the high trust environment where deals can be sprouted and, new adventures had.
To me, the trust stuff, that links very strongly with other authors of the last 10 years where trust is such a big thing. And I like the fact he's so honest that it's fundamentally about time and making an effort and finding a point of emotional connection. But the bit that really stuck out to me was the thing of being useful, grateful, and valuable. Because having just written a blog post on what should we, work towards in life, status or value, I'd written lots of similar stuff about value that matched with what he said about being useful and valuable. But the grateful thing was the bit that jumped out to me, because having been trained as a philosopher, I've been trained to be too rational every minute of every day, and I've tried to beat the training out of my head over time. But I still forget to be openly emotional and to be openly grateful to people. I will act in the appropriate way and I'll do as many things as I can to be supportive and helpful. But he just makes the point, how are people going to know how you're feeling about the opportunity if you don't tell them? And for me, that was the big penny drop of, well, if you're being useful, people can probably see that. If you're adding value, well, people can probably see that too. But if you don't say that you're grateful for the chance to be there, how's anyone ever going to know? And if you're not the first person who's willing to be a little bit emotionally open, why would this new person you're trying to get to know and trying to build trust with also take the risk of being emotionally open? Much better to lead and show it's okay to be emotionally open, because if this is going to be a long-term business relationship that quite possibly is also going to become a friendship, isn't it better we get to the important human bits faster?
Yeah, that part of the book actually really affected me in a way. It just gave me a hurry up to do more of that, because I am living in a state of eternal gratefulness or gratitude with the people around me, you included, but being more deliberate. Since reading this book, I've been more deliberate in being quick back to say thank you or to acknowledge something that really surprised me in a nice way. And it feels good to do it. It takes next to nothing to do, but I sense it's well received at the other end.
Yeah, that's my feeling too. Like, the hard work is getting used to doing it. It's not that it's hard work once you decide to do it, but remembering, actually, if there's something here to be emotionally open about that you're grateful for, say it straight away. And you don't have to gush, and it doesn't have to take long. 5 words, 5 seconds, and you've let someone know how much you appreciate the fact that you're involved in what's going on and you're a part of what's moving forward, and that, hey, a positive relationship is building here or being maintained. Because that's the other thing. Now we're all so busy. How often do relationships drift? Because when we catch up, we do the technical stuff, we do the little bit of work that was needed, we solve some problem, but do we take the extra 5 seconds to go, it was great being able to talk about work. Have you got a minute to just catch up? What kind of difference can that make if people are happy to find that minute with you?
Well, that's true. And without being overly gendered, I know that the research says blokes, especially older blokes, are particularly bad.
We're way worse at this. Yes, let's just go hands up and admit it.
Yes, but it has to be actively worked upon, because otherwise life does become cardboard and shorter. And actually have a longer, healthier life if you can have those interactions. So let's just pause the podcast right now, David, and shoot the breeze. Actually, no, we'll do that off air, because we'll also remember the other golden rule: the other person's time is more important than yours. So whose rule was that?
That's Josh Burnoff, and it's called
Josh Burnoff.
Iron Imperative.
Yes. Okay. So we'll do that later between the two of us. But now there was one other thing about this book. If you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, this sounds, look, okay, but yeah, a little bit soft, you get taken advantage of. It's heartening to know that Joe Polish, especially the last chapter or the second to last chapter, really goes into great detail about, yes, you need to act like this, but at the same time, you are keeping a weather eye on the reciprocity. If the person that you are helping and opening doors for is not showing any signs of reciprocating or being grateful or anything like that, then you have to make some judgments about how much more energy you put into that relationship. Now, there's a risk that it falls back to just being pure, naked sense of being a transactional approach to life. What's your take on this, David?
I think a couple of things. An important thing is why Joe Polish wrote the book. He wrote the book because he was burned out, because he'd tried to be so helpful and build so many connections and build so many businesses that he literally took a year off of work to write the book and recuperate, and to remind himself that you should always do the right thing because that's how you want to be in the world. But that if you don't get a positive response and people don't behave caringly back, that's the time to go, hang on, what am I doing? Why am I investing in this when there's so many more people and opportunities? And it's an interesting rule he has in the book, where he has his own version of the golden rule. And it is, don't treat people how you would like to be treated. Treat people how they would like to be treated. And the great thing is, it keeps the focus on understanding the person you're interacting with as they want to be understood. Now, if that's a positive thing and they're being caring and interesting and thoughtful, absolutely treat them how they want to be treated. But if they're being difficult and obnoxious and demanding and they're trying to dominate you, well, there's a good hint. It's time to step sideways, find an elegant way out of the situation, and go look for a next opportunity with someone who will reciprocate in a sort of more caring and effective way.
Yeah. And as a note, in our next segment called Problems, I'm going to riff on that golden rule and apply it to communication. But any final thoughts from the Joe Polish book? Either some tips, if someone listening does want to actually read it, how to approach it to get the most out of it, or just generally, what sort of takeaways could we apply as of now to the way we act within our business?
Three things, really. First thing is, remember that we're all human first and foremost, even though we get distracted into functioning within systems and a bit often like machines as a consequence. And Joe Polish is a great way to remember that from being very human, very good outcomes can, be achieved. The second thing is, remember to be grateful for the fact you're in the game, part of the opportunity, part of the chance to build something more and do something more. And even if you're a bit tired and a bit frustrated, focusing on the fact you're also a bit grateful will help to balance up the world. And third thing, remember that other people want to be seen and perceived as themselves. So if you can treat them how they would like to be treated rather than how you would like to be treated, you're actually showing a higher level of consideration and awareness of others, which really doesn't end well.
That's a nice summary, and hopefully it gives us all a chance to look at the way we act in our business and add a bit of polish.
Our 4 Ps. Number 3, problems. I asked the question for the best reason possible. Simple curiosity. Oscar Wilde.
In the problems segment today, it's not opening the mailbag to look at one particular email. I'm going to bring a few of them together because picking up on what you were just saying before, David, about Joe Polish's golden rule, treat other people how they would like to be treated, I had that experience thrust upon me. There's a client I've been working with for a little while, and I've been reflecting on the fact that of all the people I work with, this particular person seem to be the hardest to get traction with. Definitely, whenever we meet, we have great conversations and set plans, and then my team and I, we go off and we do things, but then waiting for the feedback, the check, can drag on for weeks, sometimes months, with nothing, zip. And it turns out that we have a case here where this particular person has a very specific method of communication that works to his strengths and weaknesses that was very different to mine. And although I try to, make sure I meet people where they're at, this one was getting into my blind spot. I wasn't seeing it. I couldn't understand it. And it boiled down to this. We could say things in Zoom sessions. That was great. Have a chat on the phone. All good. But then when I'd send the emails, because I love email for planning things and reporting on things, because there's a beautiful trail. Not a trail in a forensic catch them out later way, but a trail in, yes, if I need to jog my memory about something, there it all is. That's what I said. Kaboom, kaboom. Fantastic. This guy never opens his email. Very rarely, I should say. He says he can't bring himself to do it. His eyes glaze over. He's frozen by the overload of his inbox. He said, can you just send me an SMS? Oh, I thought, so we now communicate in SMS. And David, you're on this journey with me. It's changed everything. That simple little tweak. And the golden rule, his golden rule is SMS for everything. But if I need to see an email, send me an SMS to direct me to that email when it's waiting in my inbox. And it's actually working. It's a different way of operating, but I think Joe Polish will be looking down upon us and smiling.
Well, Joe Polish and also Josh Burnoff we've really found a way to work with someone's version of the iron imperative, that their time is more valuable than ours. In this case, this is a very busy person like we all are, but who's learnt to cope with busy in a very specific way. The minute you let this person know you've got an email and I need you to read it and respond to it, it happens because it's a single task rather than the daunting thing of 100 emails in an inbox.
So there you go. You might be having a client or a customer that things aren't quite gelling with from the communications perspective. So that's why I thought I'd share that one this time round, just in case it's a way of mixing that Rubik's Cube up again and having a look at a different way of trying to crack the code.
Our 4 Ps. Number 4. Perspicacity. The one duty we owe to history is to rewrite it. Oscar Wilde.
For our perspicacity segment to finish with, I want to just lay back and say, sick 'em, David.
I'm sort of already feeling nauseous by this ad. Going, wow, it was an alternative universe where you could have an anteater and a nearly naked young woman, and it could be on mainstream TV before 9 p.m.
Yes, we are taking you back to about 1989, I believe. Tonya or Tonea, I haven't found out how to pronounce her first name, but let's call her Tonya. Tonya Bird. She was a model at that time, and she got cast in an ad for Ants Pants. And let's have a listen to it, and then actually I'll describe what we're about to listen to. That might be a way to go. You've got this young woman on a bed. It's sort of twilighty, the light coming through the Venetian blinds. And as she lays back on her bed, wearing nothing other than panties and a tank top, we start seeing ants crawling up her thigh, across her nether regions. And then at that point, we become aware that there's an anteater in her bed, sort of going, "Rrr," to which he says, gives him permission to go for the ants, sick and Rex. Let's have a listen.
Sick 'em Rex.
Hole-proof ants pants. It's unbelievable underwear.
I really can't believe two things, David. I can't believe with my 2022 sensibilities this ad being made and being shown, but also I was alive in 1989, and all I tend to remember is that it brought hilarity and notoriety with Sick and Rex entering the vernacular, but not as much nuanced awareness of just how wrong it was on so many levels. Is this historical relativism? Is this what we're experiencing when we look back on this ad?
It's such an interesting thing because we're both perceiving it from the perspective of males. I couldn't really see it very well even in 1989, even on a big screen TV, which big screen TVs weren't very big in 1989. But the point is, the way the line was delivered is fantastic and was very funny. And if you just hear the ad, well, clearly Rex is getting excited about something that's been given permission to go wild. That's kind of cool. The visuals... Again, how did women respond in 1989? And how many feminists probably had to try and explain at that point to the ad agency and TV industry that that was really inappropriate and we really shouldn't keep doing ads like this?
Well, the interesting thing is I was in the media at that point, and in fact I was doing talkback radio at that point, and I'm sure that had that debate been of any great momentum, it would have been in my memory of the time. I can't recall. I mean, apart from the normal bits of controversy of any ad that pushes boundaries, there was nothing foundational or fundamental that I recall from that. And I wonder if its saving grace, to a degree, was the empowerment with which Tonya Bird was portrayed in that case. She was in control.
Precisely, and that might have been the one saving grace. But I think the big thing I'm taking away from this is that think about the cultural norms of your era when you make ads and thinking about, do you want those cultural norms to stay as they are? Do you want cultural norms to become more considerate? Do you want to push the limits just to get attention? And if you do, remember one day there might be a backlash. So there's a lot of things to think about here of how are you perceiving the culture of the day and where do you see yourself fitting? And I suppose an interesting question to ask with an ad like that is, what if it was your daughter that was the actress? It becomes an interesting question from a marketing perspective.
Well, yes, and it is one where there is complexity. In fact, we mentioned John Cleese and his war against wokeism, and this is something that we have to wrestle with as marketers communicating in the public square, is on one hand, I can hear very justified voices saying this is exploiting and objectifying women, but equally with the same power, voices from a similar lobby saying, how dare you say that the woman is weak and passive here when she's completely in control? What do we do as marketers? We possibly, unless we have a strong mission or calling that is really wanting to weather this storm and take a nuanced stance, we probably avoid going into this territory. So from a perspicacious perspective, I reflect on it now. I can't see this being made again unless Elon Musk has his way and who is a bit like the modern day version of Heath Ledger's Joker and is piling up the dollar bills to burn them and laugh at the world getting all up in arms over all sorts of things. I just think it's probably safer there are other ways that we can creatively engage with an audience without having to risk triggering people legitimately or triggering the controversy crowd who come in at a moment's notice.
I think the other thing to add to this is something to think about if you're going to work with a marketing company, whether it be us or anyone else, that part of the conversation is not just for us to have creative ideas or you to tell us your creative ideas and add value to them, but to work out, okay, where do you want to, this to sit in terms of how your brand is perceived? Because once this thing is out of the barn and in the world, how you are perceived, how your business is perceived, is going to be affected by what the audience think. And a large amount of discussion of anything that could be controversial is going, once it's in the wild, what's the blowback going to be? And are you ready for the blowback? And do you want to risk the blowback if it goes as badly as perhaps we think it could?
And as a final aside, Ms. Bird, after doing this ad, she moved to Europe and she married a Norwegian prince and basically stopped modelling around that time. That marriage didn't last. And then after the divorce, she had a child with an Austrian prince. They later married, and as far as we know, they're still living in Vienna. So do you call that a happy ending, David?
I hope so. I would hope becoming a princess also looks like an empowered move.
Well, oh my goodness, that opens up another can of ants. See you again next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Talking About Marketing. If you enjoyed it, please leave a rating or a review in your favourite podcast app. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Steve and David always welcome your comments and questions, so send them to podcast@talkedaboutmarketing.com. And finally, the last word to Oscar Wilde. There's only one thing worse than being talked about, and that's not being talked about.
Hi, Jeremy Cordeaux in the Court of Public Opinion. I'm just on air here to let you know that we'll be live streaming the Court of Public Opinion every Friday between 9 o'clock and 12 on jeremycordeaux.com. Please join us. We'd love to have you.